When the world goes quiet, some voices still remain. Not every soul finds peace when the clock strikes 12. There are stories hidden in the shadows, whispers drifting between the living and the forgotten. Some stories linger, some souls don't leave. Welcome to Stillness After Midnight, where every silence tells a story. If you're drawn to the mysteries that stir after dark, the voices that echo when the world sleeps, subscribe now and join us as we listen to the souls who still have something to say, because in the stillness, the truth finally speaks. Have you ever stood in a place so still, so drenched in silence, that even your breath feels like an intrusion? That's how I felt the first time I stepped into the village of Ban Nafra, hidden somewhere between Chiang Mai and Chiang Rai, where the roads narrowed into dirt and the air smelled of wet soil and incense. It wasn't on the maps. I hadn't planned to be there. But sometimes, some places choose you. I was 38, an editor for a travel magazine in London, the kind of man who rolled his sleeves past his elbows and carried an old leather-bound notebook like a badge of honor. I had come to Thailand not for beaches or parties, but for the strange things, legends whispered under banyan trees, shrines no guidebook dared list. There was a rumor I had chased for weeks, a temple, said to be older than any map could recall, a temple that locals only mentioned in hushed tones, as if speaking its name would bring it closer. I found it by accident, or so I thought. It was late afternoon when I arrived. The sky hung low with rain that never fell, and the forest pressed in like a sleeping animal. The temple sat beyond the edge of the village, half devoured by vines and thyme. No name on the gate, just two stone lions, mouths open wide as if caught mid-scream. I stepped inside. The floor creaked under my boots, wooden, old. The scent of age was heavy, layered with jasmine and old prayers. Dust swirled in the narrow beams of sunlight that slanted through the lattice windows. And then I saw it. Behind a curtain of faded red silk, barely swaying though there was no wind, something shifted. It was faint, a whisper of movement, like a child ducking behind fabric during a game. I froze, my eyes locked on the curtain. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, click, a sharp, clear sound, like tiny wooden sandals on old floorboards. Then silence. Swastikrab, I said softly. Hello? No answer. I drew closer to the curtain. The air felt colder now. My breath clouded for a second, though the day was warm. With one trembling hand, I pulled the silk aside. There on a small wooden altar sat a figure no taller than a child's toy. A statue, gold-painted but flaking with time. The head was shaven like a monk's, but the face was that of a boy. Round, cherubic, with lips curved into a slight smile. Not joyful, not wicked, just knowing. Its eyes were painted black, too real. Kumanthong, I whispered. I had read the word before in a forum online. A spirit child bound to a statue. In old times made from the bodies of stillborns, blessed by monks to become protective spirits. Or so the story said. Around the statue were offerings, broken toys, sweets sealed in plastic, and 3 tiny glasses filled with dark red liquid that might have once been Fanta. None of them seemed fresh. None of them had dust. Behind me, the curtain rustled, though I had not moved. I spun around. Nothing. But I knew even then, I wasn't alone. That evening, I stayed in a wooden guest house near the edge of the village. The kind built on stilts, with bamboo walls so thin you could hear your neighbor's dreams. The old woman who owned it spoke no English, only smiled when I paid, and pointed toward the room with a toothless nod. My room had a small altar in the corner, standard in Thai homes, but this one had no Buddha, only a small, empty pedestal, as if something used to be there. I placed my backpack down and unpacked the statue I'd foolishly purchased from the temple. Yes, I bought it. The monk had said nothing, only gestured with 2 fingers. Take it, leave an offering. I had left a few baht and a candy bar from my pocket. The statue felt warm when I picked it up, but I told myself it was just the heat. Now in the pale yellow glow of the single hanging bulb, the Kumanthong sat on the desk, staring at me. I turned it to face the wall. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. The sounds of the village hummed in soft layers. Crickets chirping, dogs barking in the distance, a motorcycle sputtering out somewhere near the river. But just as I closed my eyes, I heard it. He, a child's giggle, right by my ear. I sat up, heart hammering. The room was empty. My door was shut. No footsteps outside. Just that laughter, lingering like smoke. I turned to the desk. The statue was facing me again. I didn't sleep much that night. When the sun finally crept in through the slats, I got up, washed my face, and convinced myself I had imagined it. Jet lag, village sounds, maybe a gecko scurrying in the rafters. Maybe the statue had moved 2 inches to the left. It was sitting just off the center of the desk now, angled slightly toward the bed. I didn't touch it. I didn't say a word. But something old in my bones, some primal whispering instinct, told me not to throw it away. You don't discard something that watches you. That afternoon I returned to the temple. But it was different. There were no monks. The gate was closed, though I had seen no gate the day before. The same stone lions now looked eroded, their mouths cracked, as if screaming had turned them to dust. I stood there uncertain until a boy on a bicycle rode past and paused. "You see her?" he asked in broken English. "Her?" He pointed toward the temple. "Lady, inside, red curtain." "There was no one." He frowned. "No, she behind curtain. She sell the statue." I looked at the gate again. Cold sweat trickled down my spine. "There was no woman," I whispered. The boy just pedaled away. That night I dreamt of water, of a temple sinking slowly beneath a black lake, smoke rising from its windows, laughter bubbling from beneath the surface. And in the dream I stood on the shore, holding the statue like a child, and it whispered, "You took me. Now I'm yours." I woke with a start. The room was dark, the air too still, and then, clear as bells, came the sound. Click, click, click. Tiny wooden footsteps, crossing the floor, closer, and then silence. I carried it with me. Even when I changed guest houses the next day, moved deeper into the village, to one of those old homestays with bamboo fences and open-air bathrooms. I packed the statue carefully in a cotton bag and placed it in my satchel, as if I were protecting it or protecting myself from it. I don't know why I did that. No one told me to. No dream ordered it. No voice whispered it. But the silence around the statue had begun to grow teeth. The new room was smaller. No desk, just a sleeping mat, a mosquito net, and a low wooden shelf by the window. I didn't want to put the statue there, but when I unpacked, I found my hand automatically placing it on the shelf, exact center, facing the room, as if it belonged. I stepped back and stared at it. Its golden paint caught the sunlight, almost glowed. I thought about turning it to face the window. I didn't. That night I lit a single candle and tried reading an old book I'd bought in Chiang Mai, a collection of Thai folktales, translated into shaky English. My eyes kept returning to the same passage. To offer to Kumanthong, one must give sweets, milk, and toys. He is a child, but he carries the memory of death. The page trembled in my hand, or maybe it was just me. Outside, the night deepened into silence. Even the frogs had quieted. I remember noticing that, the quiet, the kind that presses against your eardrums, as if something unseen is inhaling all sound. And then, scratch, scratch, from the far corner of the room. I turned. Nothing. The candle flickered. I looked back at the statue. Its head was tilted now. Not a lot, but slightly to the right. I hadn't touched it. "Must have bumped the shelf," I muttered aloud, as if hearing my own voice would make it real. Then came the sound again. Scratch, tap, tap, scratch, like little fingers on woven bamboo. I stood up, heart tight in my chest. I didn't say anything. I just stared into the dark corner where the sound had come from, holding the candle in my hand like a sword that could never cut. Something moved, just once. A breeze? A shadow? No. It was slower than a breeze, smaller than a shadow, like a child crawling across the floorboards, but not quite touching. In the morning, the candle had burned itself out, wax spilled onto the floor like milk, and beside it, a small red candy, wrapped, perfectly placed at the statue's feet. I didn't own any candy, and no one had entered the room. The old man who ran the homestay said he never came upstairs, but when I asked him about Kumanthong, something shifted in his face, as if a memory tugged at his skin from beneath. "Do not talk," he whispered. "Not here." "Why?" He only stared at the ground, and then slowly pressed two fingers together and made a tapping gesture on the wood floor. Click, click. I left the house without another word. That afternoon, I walked through the village, hoping to distract myself. I passed school children laughing, a woman arranging flowers before a shrine, monks walking barefoot in silence. Normal things, human things. But I couldn't shake the sense that the statue hadn't stayed in the room, that somehow it had come with me, its little footsteps echoing somewhere behind mine, out of sync but always following. I returned just before sunset. On the shelf, the statue sat where I'd left it, but beside it now, a coin, an old one, from the Rama V era, rusted, worn. It hadn't been there that morning. I didn't question it anymore. I just stared and nodded once, as if acknowledging a gift from a child I could no longer see, but who demanded I act as if I could. I bought sweets that evening, 2 strawberry lollipops, and a small bottle of milk from the stall down the road. I placed them gently beside the statue on a folded scarf, like a makeshift altar. Then I whispered, "Thank you," not knowing why. And in the stillness that followed, I swear, something exhaled, long and soft, as if satisfied. That night I slept, not deeply, not comfortably, but I slept, and I dreamed again. A corridor of red curtains, one after another, fluttering as I walked through. No wind, but they moved, whispered, and behind each one the same statue, repeated again and again, each with a child's voice, laughing, calling, "Play with me, play with me." And then silence. At the end of the corridor was a mirror. In it, I saw not myself, but the back of my head, and a small boy's face over my shoulder, smiling. I woke to the smell of burnt milk. The bottle I had placed on the shelf was blackened, cracked, its cap melted. The candy was gone. In its place, a feather, white, soft, still warm. And the statue, this time, was no longer smiling. Its lips were turned downward. That day, I didn't leave the house. I sat by the window, writing in my journal, trying to make sense of it all. But every so often, I would glance at the shelf, and every time the statue seemed to have moved, just slightly. Its angle, its tilt, the position of its tiny painted hands, as if it were listening, waiting. Later, just before dusk, a woman from the village knocked on my door. Her eyes were pale, cloudy with cataracts, and her arms trembled as she held out a bundle of joss sticks and incense. She didn't speak, only pointed at the statue, then at the incense, then at me. I nodded. She left. That night I lit the incense and whispered again, "Thank you." And that night, no footsteps, no laughter, no dreams, only silence. But not an empty silence. It was full, heavy, like the pause before a scream. I should have left then, returned to Chiang Mai, thrown the statue into the river, checked out and booked a flight back to London. But I didn't, because deep down, some part of me believed I was being chosen. And the silence? It was no longer just outside of me. It was crawling in, like smoke under a door. There's something about wind that changes when it carries laughter. Not the kind you hear on playgrounds, but the kind that sounds like it remembers pain, that slips through the cracks of old walls and curls around your neck like a cold, wet thread. It began on the third night. The day had passed without incident. I had stayed inside mostly, reading translated Buddhist texts I'd found at a market stall. They spoke of karma as a thread spun tighter with each deed. I tried to believe it was philosophy, not prophecy, but as the sun bled into the horizon and shadows climbed the bamboo walls like insects, I noticed something strange. The wind had changed. It no longer rustled the leaves outside. It whispered through them, as if pushing words across their surface. I closed the windows and lit the incense again. The air inside grew thick with jasmine smoke. Then came the sound. He, he, soft, just beneath the breath of the wind, not loud, but unmistakable, childlike. I froze. My fingers tightened around the half-burnt joss stick. My chest rose in shallow pools of air. Somewhere behind me, the floor creaked. Just once. Deliberate. I turned, slowly. The statue sat where I had left it, on the shelf. But now, there was something different. The red scarf I had laid beneath it was damp, wet, as if soaked in morning dew. But the room was dry. The bottle of milk from the night before was untouched, yet the cap was gone. I moved closer. There were fingerprints on the bottle, tiny ones, not mine. I told myself I needed air, real air, not this thick, incense-soaked breath of ghosts. So I stepped out, barefoot, into the night. The village was sleeping, except for the wind. It moved through the trees like it had a purpose, like it was searching. Every now and then, I would hear a rustle that didn't match the rest, a patter, a shuffle, a giggle. No children were outside, but I could feel one watching me. I turned toward the temple road. Something inside me, it wasn't reason or instinct, but something older, told me to follow it. The same pull that makes fish swim upstream or moths burn in light. I walked. The dirt road felt cold against my soles. The wind grew stronger, and the laughter. He, don't look, don't look. It was inside my ears now, not around me, inside. The temple was darker than I remembered. No lanterns lit, no moon above, just shadows, long and deep like wells. The gate stood open this time. I passed through without thinking. Inside, the air was still, the silence expectant. I moved through the temple corridors with my phone light trembling in my hand. The red curtain was there again, though I was certain it had burned in my dream. It swayed gently, like it had breath. Behind it, I knew, the altar waited, but I didn't touch it this time. I whispered, "Why?" And in the silence that followed, something answered. Not in words, not out loud, but through a feeling, one I hadn't felt in years. Abandonment. I left the temple in a daze, not remembering the walk home. When I returned to my room, the incense had long since died out. Ash lay curled like sleeping worms across the floor. And on the shelf, the statue had turned. It now faced the window, toward the temple. Its eyes seemed wet. I began to leave the light on at night. Not because I believed it would stop anything, but because the darkness had started to speak. The laughter was more frequent now. Sometimes I would hear it beneath my pillow, sometimes in the walls. Once, while washing my face, it echoed from the drain. Always that same voice. Light, high-pitched but hollow, like it was mimicking what laughter used to sound like it had forgotten joy and only remembered the shape of it. Then came the night I found the toy. It was sitting at the foot of my sleeping mat, a small wooden elephant, chipped at the edges, painted red and gold. I hadn't seen it before. I hadn't bought it. But when I touched it, a memory surged. Not mine. A child squatting in the dirt, carving the elephant with a dull knife. The sun hot, flies buzzing. A woman crying in the distance. Then, pain. A rope. A scream. Silence. I dropped the toy. It thudded once. Then nothing. The statue on the shelf was smiling again. The next morning I went to the market and bought more milk, more sweets. I didn't question it anymore. It felt like routine, like feeding a stray that might otherwise bite. But when I returned, the woman who owned the homestay stopped me. She pointed at the bag and said, "You feed?" I nodded. She stepped closer, her wrinkled fingers trembling as they hovered near my chest. Not touching, just sensing. "You take from temple?" I didn't speak. Her eyes narrowed. "You not leave until he ready." I asked what she meant, but she just looked past me, toward the window, then whispered, "Wind come when he want to play." That evening, I tried to write, tried to document everything. Dates, sensations, objects moved, sounds heard. As a journalist, it was instinct. I needed something to hold on to, something rational. But my words came out like confessionals, like prayers, like pleas. And when I looked down, I realized my handwriting had changed. It was smaller, rounder, like a child's. The wind returned again after midnight. This time it didn't whisper. It howled. The door to my room shuddered. The windows rattled in their frames. The flame of my candle bent so hard it nearly went out. And over it all, laughter. Wild, gleeful, echoing laughter. Dozens of voices. Children, all around, above, beneath, like a playground in a thunderstorm. I covered my ears, curled into myself, tried to recite something, anything, but my mouth felt full of sand. Then silence. It ended, just like that. And in the sudden quiet, I heard the smallest sound, the voice of one child right beside me whispering, "I found you." I opened my eyes. The candle was out. The room was ice cold, and on the mat beside me, a handprint, small, made of ash. Some things don't need to move quickly to terrify you. A door doesn't need to slam. It only needs to creak open on its own. A shadow doesn't need to leap. It only needs to stay just slightly wrong. And the statue didn't need to crawl. It only needed to shift a little each day. The morning after the laughter storm, I sat still for a long time. I hadn't lit incense. I hadn't made an offering. I hadn't even touched the statue, but it had moved again. This time, the difference was unmistakable. It now sat on the floor, right beside my pillow. Its golden face was tilted toward mine. Its small hands rested on its knees, and its eyes, those glossy black dots of paint, seemed brighter somehow, like something behind them had woken up. I didn't scream. I didn't run. Some part of me, something older than logic, knew screaming wouldn't help. It would only make the air thicker, give it shape, give it appetite. Instead, I picked the statue up, cradled it gently like a child, and whispered, "Where do you want to be?" It didn't answer, but the silence in the room shifted, grew, warmer, as if the walls exhaled in relief. I placed the statue back on the shelf, lit a candle, and prayed, not to any god I knew, just to whatever was watching, whatever had always been watching. Later that day, I walked to the river behind the homestay. I thought about throwing the statue in. I really did. But when I pulled it from the bag, something stopped me. The river grew still. Not quiet, still, like it had frozen under the surface. Even the ripples halted. I held the statue over the water. My fingers shook. And then, in the reflection, I saw something I cannot explain. Not my face, not a ghost, not a child, but a mother. Squatting by the riverbank, crying softly, whispering the same words again and again. "Don't forget him. Don't forget him. Don't forget." I dropped the statue, but it didn't fall. My hands had clenched around it before I realized. My body refused. Some part of me refused. So I sat beside the river instead, and I cried too, though I didn't know for whom. That night the statue stayed on the shelf, or so I thought. But when I woke up, the offerings I'd placed were gone. Milk, candy, even the incense, all missing. And in their place, a drawing, charcoal, childlike, on old paper, torn at the edges, a picture of me, sleeping, and standing above me, a small, dark figure, smiling. I went to the village monk the next morning. I had to. The temple was no longer accessible, the gate now wrapped in cloth charms and wooden stakes like an exorcism ritual. So I found the younger monk at a small shrine near the rice fields. I brought the drawing and the statue wrapped in a scarf. When I unwrapped it, the monk's eyes darkened. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said softly, "You feed it too long." I asked him what he meant. He replied, "Some spirits, they not want to go. They want family. But I didn't mean to." He shook his head. "Intent not matter, only bond. You take him, he follow. You give food, you give place. And if I stop?" The monk looked at me with the saddest eyes I've ever seen. "He think you leave again. That worse than death." I didn't return to the homestay that night. I stayed by the shrine, the statue between us, wrapped again in cloth. The monk chanted, low, rhythmic tones that sounded like breath woven into music. He placed a small amulet on my chest and whispered something I couldn't catch. I fell asleep sitting up. The wind did not blow. The night stayed still. But when I awoke, the statue was no longer wrapped. It sat in front of me, facing the monk, and the monk's eyes were open. But he was not breathing. He lived, barely. "A stroke," the doctor said. But I knew. Something in that statue had tested him, found him unfit, or maybe too knowing. I returned to the homestay in silence. And the statue, back on my shelf, back where it always wanted to be. Over the next few days, I began to notice the shifts more clearly. It never moved while I watched. But whenever I left the room, or blinked too long, it was somewhere else. By the window, by the door. Once, right beside my shoes. And each time, it faced me, not threatening, not angry, just waiting, as if asking a question I didn't understand. The final sign came 3 nights later. I had taken to sleeping with the candle burning low, afraid of the dark and what stirred in it. But that night, the flame turned blue, and the air turned metallic. I smelled blood, though none was there. And then, the sound. Tick, 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 like a watch. But not mechanical, biological, like a heartbeat too close to your ear. Wet, hollow. I sat up. The statue was gone, nowhere in sight. And then, click, right behind me. I turned slowly, and there it was, on my pillow, its hand resting where my head had been, and a whisper not in my ears but in my thoughts. "I moved so you know I'm here." I didn't sleep after that. I stayed awake, and we watched each other, all night, me in the corner, and it on my pillow, breathing without breath. I stopped offering things on the 6th day. No more milk, no candy, no incense. I told myself it was time to end it, that I had fed the illusion long enough, and whatever had grown between me and the statue had to be starved. But that night, the shelf wasn't empty. It was full. 3 red soda bottles, their glass sweating with cold. A plate of sticky rice wrapped in banana leaves. 5 sweets wrapped in paper I didn't recognize. Dark red with golden thread, and a single white lotus, fresh, petals wide open. My stomach dropped. I hadn't placed any of them there, and no one else had entered the room. I knew that. I was sure. The door had remained locked, the window shut, the scarf I'd stuffed under the door still folded in place. Yet, there they were, unasked for, unexplained. And beside them sat the statue, arms folded in its lap like a monk in meditation, eyes downturned, serene, but something about the stillness, It felt like pride, like a child waiting to be praised for good behavior. I backed away, not taking my eyes off the offerings. Something inside me whispered, "Don't thank it," as if gratitude would seal something I hadn't agreed to. So I stood still, watching, and the silence thickened. Heavy, humid. The room smelled sweet, almost sickly, like sugar left too long in the sun. And then I heard it again. He, the laughter. But this time it came from two directions at once. One from behind the statue, the other inside my ear. I slept outside that night, on the balcony, wrapped in a thin blanket, pretending the mosquitoes were my biggest problem. I didn't bring the statue, but when I awoke, before sunrise with the sky still dark, the statue was there, sitting at my feet. Its hands were wet. With dew, I told myself. But dew doesn't smell like iron. I confronted the old woman who owned the homestay. I didn't mention the spirit or the statue. I just asked, "Did you put offerings in my room?" She looked up slowly, her face unreadable. "No," she said in a low voice. "You already put." "I didn't." She paused, then said almost to herself, "Sometimes, when spirit accepts you, you forget what you give." Her eyes glazed, unfocused. And then she added more softly, as if remembering something ancient. "Some give food, some give sleep, some give name." I didn't ask what that last one meant, because I was afraid I already knew. I tried leaving the village. I packed my things, wrapped the statue in the scarf, placed it in my bag, and headed toward the main road. I walked for 30 minutes until the trees thinned and the edge of the jungle gave way to a dusty path. I waited for a bus. None came. Not that hour, not the next. Not even as the sun began to set. I asked a farmer passing by when the next ride to the city was. He looked at me strangely. "There's no bus here." "But the guidebook said—" He shook his head. "No bus, not for a long time." "How long?" He hesitated, then said, "Since she closed temple." "Who?" He looked past me and walked away. I turned back, feeling that tight pressure behind my eyes. Not fear, not frustration, but the deep, dragging pull of inevitability, like walking against a tide that was never water. When I reached the homestay, the offerings had doubled. More sweets, a toy drum, and a piece of paper, folded, yellowed, placed carefully beside the statue. I opened it. Inside, drawn in crayon, two stick figures, one tall, one small, holding hands. Above them, scrawled in shaky Thai script, Pkabluk, father and child. I stared at it for a long time. I don't have children, never wanted them. But somehow, the word father felt heavier than the paper in my hands, like a rope slipping around the neck of memory. That night, I tried one final act of denial. I removed the offerings, all of them. I walked to the edge of the rice field and buried them beneath the soil. Bottle, candy, drawing, all of it. Then I returned to my room, heart pounding, jaw clenched. The statue was gone. I didn't move, didn't speak. The wind outside had died. The frogs were silent. Even the night had stilled itself, waiting. I turned slowly, scanning the room. No statue, not by the shelf, not on the floor, not on the pillow. And then I heard it. Tuck, tuck, tuck. A rhythmic tapping, not on the floor, not on the walls, but under the bed. I bent down, and I saw a hand, small, carved, tapping the wood, over and over, like a child knocking gently on a coffin lid. I left the room, slept in the temple ruins, not inside, just at the steps. I leaned against the stone lions, their mouths worn open, moss growing in their eyes. The air smelled of dust and old incense, but it was free of sugar, free of gifts, free of laughter. I slept with one ear open, and in my dream I heard a voice, not a whisper, not a giggle, a clear, articulate voice of a child, speaking perfect English. Why do you keep giving me away? They say monks are men of wisdom, that they offer clarity, compassion, answers. But in Bon Na Fra, the monks carry silence like a wound. And when they look at you, they don't see a man. They see a question they've been told not to ask. I returned to the temple the next morning. Not the ruined one, the new one. Modest, cream-colored, built near the rice fields. A place for morning alms, chanting, lanterns during festivals. The kind of temple tourists photograph and forget. But I wasn't a tourist anymore. I was something else. Something the wind had marked. I found 3 monks sweeping leaves along the stone path. They were young. One couldn't have been more than 20. Their robes the color of saffron, their steps light and practiced. I bowed politely, as I'd seen others do. They paused. The youngest smiled. The others didn't. I approached slowly and removed the wrapped statue from my bag. I found this, I said, near the old temple. The older monk, the one with sharp eyes and a thin scar on his cheek, stepped back, as if I'd drawn a blade. He said nothing, but the air between us grew colder. The youngest monk's smile vanished. He glanced nervously at the others, then said softly, "You should not bring that here." "Why not?" The scarred monk finally spoke. 4 words. "It's not ours anymore." I asked what he meant, asked where it came from, who made it, why it followed me. He looked toward the horizon and said nothing, then walked away, sweeping leaves that no longer existed. I tried again. "Was it cursed? Is it angry? Is it—" The youngest monk held up a hand. "It is lonely." That word struck harder than any curse. Not evil, not demonic, just alone. And then he added gently, "Some spirits were born from love, some from grief, but this one was born from being left behind." He wouldn't say more, only told me to go to the banyan tree, near the edge of the village. "Ask the old woman," he said. "She remembers more than she should." "Who is she?" The monk smiled, and for a moment it was the saddest smile I'd ever seen. "She's the one who fed him first." I found her where he said she'd be, sitting beneath a banyan tree whose roots twisted like fingers, clawing into the earth. She was dressed in a faded indigo sarong, her hair tied in a long braid down her back, and her eyes, white as milk, stared at something long gone. She didn't flinch when I approached, didn't blink when I unwrapped the statue and placed it before her. She just reached out, and with trembling fingers, touched its head, and whispered, "Still warm." I sat beside her in the dry grass, waited. After some time she began to speak, slowly, in Thai at first, then in broken English, cracked like old bone. "There was a boy, long ago. His mother, servant to the monks, died birthing him in the temple kitchen. No name, no family. Just crying, always crying." I listened, eyes fixed on the statue. "The abbot said, 'Feed him, wash him, keep him hidden. No records, no chanting for his soul, just silence.' And the walls raised him." She paused, her fingers brushing dust from the statue's cheek. "He played in shadows, slept near incense ash. No one claimed him, no one stopped him, until one day he climbed too high." Her voice grew quieter. "The bell tower slipped, fell." She mimed the fall with her hand, fingers dropping like a leaf. "No one buried him properly, no one mourned, so he stayed." I felt the chill before she said the next words. "The monks made the statue to contain him, but he liked it, sat still, waited for someone to play." She looked at me then, blind eyes piercing something deeper than sight. "You played." "I didn't mean to," I whispered. The old woman smiled, not cruelly, not kindly, just knowingly. "Now he thinks you are his." I asked how to undo it, how to break the bond, how to send him back. She shook her head. "Children don't understand rejection." "Then what do I do?" She reached into her satchel and pulled out a small pouch, filled with white ash and dried flowers. "Burn this," she said. "Not for him, for you." "What does that mean?" But she wouldn't explain, only nodded toward the statue. "He gave you offerings. Now you give memory." I returned to my room in silence. The statue was waiting, back on the shelf, its eyes no longer downcast. They met mine, and for the first time I saw something behind them, a flicker, like the last glow in a candle before the flame vanishes. I lit the herbs. The smoke curled upward, bitter and sweet, like burning paper soaked in tears. I sat cross-legged and closed my eyes, let the scent wrap around me, and I remembered, not my memories, his, a cold floor, an empty bowl, tiny fingers tracing dust spirals alone, eyes looking up through gaps in the roof, trying to name the stars without words, and the final sound, a bell, swinging wildly in the tower, then a scream, then nothing. I opened my eyes. The smoke had stopped, the room was quiet, and the statue, gone. I thought it was over, but on the pillow was a drawing, two stick figures, one small, one tall, and between them, a rope, knotted at both ends. It rained the next morning, not a heavy storm, just that soft, steady drizzle that turns everything gray and makes the air smell like wet dust and forgotten promises. I sat beneath the banyan tree again. The old woman was already there, as if she'd never left. She didn't speak at first, just rocked gently back and forth, hands folded in her lap, staring into the mist. I placed the statue beside her again. It had returned to me sometime during the night. Not with noise, not with footsteps, just appeared, back on the pillow, staring, still, waiting. I saw his memory and I told her. She nodded as if that were expected. "He fell," I added. "No one caught him." She didn't answer, only said, "That was not the first fall." I didn't understand at first, but as she spoke, the words formed a path, winding, broken, but leading somewhere deeper than before. His soul wandered long before the bell tower, fell through years, through walls, through people. She reached out and brushed her fingers along the statue's face. "Do you know why Kumanthong statues are made from dead children?" I hesitated. "I thought it was for protection," I said. "Partly," she replied, "but mostly because no one listened to them in life." She leaned closer, her breath soft and damp. "So they speak louder in death." I felt the weight of that, not as words, but as a truth that seeped into the spine. I looked down at the small golden figure beside me. Its smile had faded, not into sadness, but into something quieter, like a child who'd finally stopped crying because he knew no one was coming. "Why me?" I asked. "Why did he choose me?" She tilted her head, bird-like. "Maybe he didn't." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she pulled from her satchel a photograph, old, creased, nearly falling apart. In it, a man stood at the foot of the old temple, a Westerner, holding a small boy's hand. The man's face was blurred. Time had eaten it away, but something in the shape, the posture, was eerily familiar. I looked closer and froze. The boy, his features were clearer, wide eyes, crooked smile, and a small scar above the left eyebrow, the same one I had. I looked up at her, heart beating harder now. "That's not possible." She didn't smile, didn't blink. Karma does not forget faces, even when the mind does. I stood, backing away slightly. "This is some mistake. I've never been here before. I've never—" She raised a hand. "Your soul has." I didn't sleep that night, not because of fear, but because memory had become porous, and I wasn't sure anymore which thoughts were mine. I began to recall things I shouldn't: a hallway lit by oil lamps, a small hand slipping from mine as the wind howled above us, a promise: "I'll be back in the morning. Just stay quiet, okay?" The the sound of a bell, a scream that didn't stop, and a silence that did. I woke at dawn to find the statue placed in my arms. I didn't panic. I just sat there cradling it, like it was something I had once known how to hold, like something I had put down too long ago. I returned to the banyan tree, but the old woman was gone. In her place, a folded cloth bundle, tied with red thread. Inside a bell, a lock of hair, a name written in fading ink, Niran, and a note in her brittle, shaky handwriting. Give him a name, or he'll keep asking you for yours. I whispered it as I lit incense beside the shrine. Niran, and the wind paused, as if listening, as if settling. That night the laughter didn't return, nor the movement. The statue sat, unmoving, but not empty. Something had quieted inside it, not vanished, just breathed. I dreamt again, but this time, the corridor of red curtains didn't lead to mirrors or drawings. It led to a field. A child ran ahead, barefoot, laughing, turning only once to say, "You came back." I woke up crying, not out of fear, but out of something else. Regret, gratitude, guilt. I'm not sure which was mine and which belonged to Niran, but they all felt honest. In the days that followed, I kept the statue near, not hidden, not feared, just acknowledged. I gave it space, a name, a voice, and in return it gave me silence. Not the heavy kind, the peaceful kind, the kind you find beneath old trees and between closing prayers. But one morning, just before I left the village for good, I found the statue had vanished. Only the scarf remained, and a final drawing, the same two figures, tall and small, but this time no rope between them, only open hands. I left Banafra the following week, or at least I thought I did. My body was on a bus, headed toward Chiang Mai. My ticket crumpled in my pocket, my bag at my feet, lighter by one statue. But part of me, a thread tied somewhere deep, somewhere silent, never left. It began again in a guest house on the edge of the old city, a quaint place, wooden floors, paper lanterns, a garden of frangipani trees that smelled like childhood lullabies. I told myself this was a reset, that the story was over, that Niran had returned to wherever souls go when they're finally named. But on the first night, I found a candle waiting on my windowsill, small, white, wrapped in red thread. I asked the receptionist about it. She smiled. "Oh, that's normal here. Guests left it, maybe. Local blessing." "Did anyone come into my room?" She paused, then said, "No, but the wind, it comes and goes." She said it as if it explained everything, and maybe in a way it did. That night I lit the candle, not out of belief, out of habit. The flame burned low, steady, the kind of flame that seems to hum when the room goes quiet. I watched it for a while until my eyes grew heavy. I left it burning in the corner and lay down. The pillow was soft, the mattress warm, the air smelled faintly of jasmine. And then I woke. The candle was still burning, but the room was different, not changed, just older. The wood beneath me creaked with a voice I hadn't heard before. The window showed no garden, only mist. And in the corner, a child, standing, still, watching me. I couldn't move, not because of fear, but because the world had thickened, like I'd woken underwater. The child stepped closer. His bare feet made no sound. His eyes were too wide, his skin pale like wax. He raised one hand, pointed at the candle, then whispered, "It can't go out if you still remember." I blinked, and I was alone again, the candle still burning, but the flame was taller now, bluer, flickering like it was breathing. I tried to blow it out, once, twice, nothing. The flame wavered but didn't die. I pinched the wick. It burned my fingers but didn't extinguish. I turned the glass upside down, still lit. In the morning I found a child's footprint on the windowsill, and beneath it, drawn in ash, Play again? I didn't check out. I stayed another night, and another. Each evening, the candle would reappear in a different spot. The bathroom sink, the stairwell, once, inside my shoe, always wrapped in red thread, always lit when I found it, always waiting. I stopped fighting it, started lighting it on my own. The dreams returned, this time warmer. The corridor of red curtains had become a narrow house. Wooden floors, paper screens. A voice calling from the next room. I made you dinner. I would enter, find a table, two bowls, one empty, one full, a candle between them, and a boy sitting across from me, just smiling. I asked him once, in the dream, "Why are you still here?" He shrugged. "I don't know how to stop." Sometimes I woke with food beside me, sticky rice, a candy, even a glass of red soda, already sweating with condensation, none of which I had bought, none of which I ever heard arrive. But each time the candle still burned, and I felt less like a guest, more like a host. I tried to leave again, booked a train south, packed my bag, stepped onto the platform, and the moment the engine roared, I heard it, the softest voice, a whisper behind my left ear. "Don't leave me behind. Again." I turned, no one there. But my seat number, 23C, was scrawled in chalk on the platform. I hadn't told anyone. I didn't even write it down. I stepped off the train, went back to the guest house. The candle was waiting on my pillow, already lit. That night I asked him again in the dream, "What do you want from me?" And he answered, slowly, clearly, "Just remember me." I think that's what the candle is now, a tether, a memory burning in both worlds. And as long as it burns, he knows someone hasn't forgotten. And maybe that's all a soul ever wants. Not release, not revenge, just not to be erased. But there's one thing I haven't told anyone. Some nights, especially when I don't light the candle, I wake up with wax on my hands and a voice in the dark that whispers, "You forgot." Mirrors make poor companions when you're not sure which side you belong to. They reflect, but they don't explain. They don't comfort. And sometimes, if you look long enough, they start to reflect things you didn't know were there. It began subtly, first with my reflection blinking a split second too late, then my hand moving before its twin, and once, when I smiled, just to check, the face in the glass did not. It stared, unmoving, expressionless, childlike. I told myself it was exhaustion, sleep deprivation, or maybe a trick of old glass warped by heat. But each morning, the mirror would feel colder than the wall around it, as if something pressed its forehead against the other side all night long, breathing, watching, waiting for my eyes to open. On the fourth night, I caught the first real glimpse. I had just stepped out of the shower. Steam still clung to the mirror in soft clouds. I wiped it once with a towel and saw in the fog corner a small handprint. Too small to be mine, too clear to be imagined. I stared, frozen, and then slowly it faded. Not like steam, not gradual, but like fingers pulled back into shadow, like a retreating thought. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the mirror, candle lit beside me. I watched my reflection for hours. It watched back, but sometimes in the periphery, when I blinked, its eyes shifted. Not down, not away. To me, not as reflection, but as witness. The next day, I asked the woman at the front desk if the mirror in my room had ever been replaced. She looked confused. "There is no mirror," she said. I let her up, opened the door, pointed, but the wall was blank, smooth, empty. No nail holes, no adhesive marks, no mirror, just pale paint and the smell of old wood. I laughed nervously, asked her to leave. When the door shut, I turned, and the mirror was back. Same frame, same crack along the lower left corner, same candlelight flickering along its edge. That was the night I saw his face. Not in a dream, not in memory, in the glass. I had dozed off, just for a second, head resting on the edge of the desk. And then the candle flared, a sharp burst of heat against my cheek. I opened my eyes, and he was there, right behind me, his face in the glass. Not standing, not framed behind me like a shadow, but pressed up against the inside of the mirror, his nose almost touching the glass, his lips moving. Though no sound came out, I spun, nothing behind me. The room was empty, but the mirror, he was still there, now smiling, softly, sadly, like a child caught doing something he knows is wrong, but still hopes you'll forgive him. I stepped closer, and his lips moved again. This time I read them. Don't leave me here. I touched the mirror, fingertips against cool surface, and for a heartbeat, it touched back. I stumbled back, knocking over the candle. The flame caught the edge of the curtain, which smoked briefly before fizzling out. And in the flickering chaos, the mirror stayed silent. Empty. Just a mirror. But I knew better. I knew who waited inside. From that night forward, the mirror followed me. Not physically, but wherever I stayed, from guest house to hostel to hotel, there was always a mirror. Even when I requested rooms without one, even when I checked first, it would appear. By the bed, behind the door, above the sink, always the same one, same crack, same reflection, same boy, watching, sometimes smiling, sometimes crying, sometimes angry. Once I found a message in the steam. You said you'd come back. I stopped sleeping, stopped unpacking, started talking to him directly, just to see if he'd answer. He never did, not with sound, but sometimes the reflection would tilt its head before mine, blink late, or mouth a word I hadn't spoken yet, like he was getting ahead of me, learning, mimicking, or maybe remembering. One morning I looked into the mirror and didn't recognize myself. It wasn't him. It wasn't me. It was both, melded, blurred, a face wearing mine like a memory worn thin. I stayed in that room 3 more days, trying to decide if I wanted to see what came next. Each night the mirror grew darker, not from outside, not from lack of light, from within, like something was burning behind it, like a candle no longer waiting for me to light it. Then on the 3rd night, I woke to find a drawing taped to the mirror. 2 faces, one large, one small, merged at the center like a Rorschach, and beneath it, in shaky handwriting, only one can come back. I don't know what that means yet. I don't know who is coming back, or from where, but sometimes now, when I look away from a window, or a phone screen, or a puddle, I see a flash of another smile. Not mine. And when I look too long into the glass, he blinks first. Some names bind you, not because you chose them, but because someone else did. And once you hear it spoken, truly spoken, you can't unhear it. It echoes not just in your ears, but in your bones. It was in the quiet that it happened, the quiet between footsteps on an empty stairwell, the hush after a phone stops ringing, the breath you hold when you know something's watching you in the dark. That's when I heard it. Father. It wasn't a scream, not a whisper. It didn't come from behind a door or from within the mirror. It came from somewhere deeper, from a space I hadn't known existed, inside myself. A voice not remembered, but known, as if I'd heard it before, long ago, on another stairwell, in another life. Father, softer now, with longing, with hurt, with hope. I sat down on the floor, hands trembling, back against the wall. The room was dim, candle lit as always, but suddenly it felt smaller. The shadows grew long, the silence crowded in. And then from the darkened corner of the room, footsteps, soft, measured, child-sized. But they didn't sound like bare feet on wood. They echoed, like small wooden sandals. Click, click, click. A shape moved there, not fully formed, half light, half memory. A child, barely 3 feet tall, shaved head, round cheeks, eyes impossibly wide, and in his hands, the same drawing. Me, him. No rope between us this time, just two hands touching. He stepped forward, and I noticed something odd. His shadow didn't follow. It stayed behind him, still, watching us both. He held the drawing out, and his lips parted. Again. Father? I took the paper. My hand touched his for a split second. Cold, but not lifeless. Cold like stone kissed by rain, like something that once burned, and now only remembers the heat. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. I wanted to ask, why me? What do you want? What did I leave undone? But all I managed was, I'm sorry. His eyes flickered, not with rage, not with forgiveness, just recognition, as if that word had meaning to him, as if he'd waited lifetimes to hear it. He pointed to the wall behind me. I turned. The mirror had returned. I hadn't seen it there before, but it was waiting. Tall, narrow, wrapped in red thread like a funeral shroud. He walked to it barefoot now, no sound this time, and with both hands he touched the glass. The surface rippled, not like water, like memory. And then he looked at me, directly, not through reflection, not through dreams, eye to eye, and said, if you leave again, I go with you. It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. I felt it then, the tether, not just to him, to the place, to the boy, to the name. Father wasn't just what he called me, it was what he made me. Not through birth, but through recognition. That night I didn't sleep. I sat across from the mirror, the candle between us. He stood on the other side, neither smiling nor frowning, just present, waiting. And sometime near dawn I whispered, what do I do? His eyes flickered to the candle, then to the door, then back to me, and I understood. He wanted to go, with me, not to haunt, not to hurt, but to belong, to be remembered somewhere beyond mist, wood, and ritual. I left the village at sunrise, didn't tell anyone, didn't take photos. I walked down the long road, bag on my back, and in it, the statue, wrapped in the old red scarf, lighter than before, but warmer, as if something inside it had stopped struggling. When I boarded the train, no voice whispered this time. No chalk mark, no laughter, no name scratched into the window. Just silence, the kind that follows understanding. But that night, in my hotel room in the city, the mirror flickered again, just once, and in it, briefly, the boy, smiling and mouthing a word I hadn't expected. Home. I lit the candle anyway, out of habit, out of love, out of fear. I don't know which anymore, but every night since, when I hear a floor creak or the wind tickle my ears or a child giggle in the distance, I don't flinch. I just say softly, I'm still here. And in the quiet that follows, sometimes, if I'm lucky, I hear him say, I know. It began with a fever. Not the kind that burns your body, but the kind that burns your name. It came on suddenly in the middle of the night while I was lighting the candle in a new room, one I didn't even remember booking, the kind of room that smells like time. My hands shook, my vision blurred, but I managed to strike the match, and when the flame caught, the room changed, not visibly, but felt. The walls pulsed, the shadows deepened, the air thickened into something that tasted like ash and old breath. And then the fire spoke, not in words, in visions. It started with a sound, a bell, swinging wildly, louder than it should have been, a panic disguised as ritual. Then, a child crying, not a baby, older, hurt, alone. I saw the temple again, but older, newer, before decay claimed it. Monks moving quickly, heads lowered, not praying, covering, a body, small, wrapped in orange cloth. But the cloth was soaked, red, too red, and I heard a voice, harsh, brittle. No record, no name, no noise. They buried him in silence, not in earth, but in clay, molded him into a statue before the soul had even cooled, wrapped bones in gold leaf, mixed ash into paint, and whispered into the hollow chest. Stay quiet, stay still, protect us. But he didn't understand. He wasn't angry. He was confused. A child with no name, no mother, no lullaby. Only the sound of bells and footsteps walking away. The fire flared, images blurred. Now a kitchen, dark, a woman sobbing, holding her belly. A birth, alone. Blood, so much blood. Then, a baby crying, the woman's last breath. A prayer to no God, only to whoever would stay. I saw monks lift the baby, not gently. Saw them hush it with cloth, not care. Saw the boy grow in shadows, not evil, just unseen. Invisible children don't know how to fade, so they reach. The vision shifted again. I was the boy now, feet bare, climbing, searching for someone to say my name. The bell tower, hands slipping, air rushing, sky spinning, and then nothing. Not blackness, but cold memory, a world that kept going without me. I saw the statue made, felt the brush paint eyes I could not close, heard the monks chanting, but not for my soul, for their safety, for containment. And so I waited, for years, decades, centuries maybe. Time doesn't move for the forgotten. Then, one day, you came, and something cracked. Not the statue, not the curse, the silence. The candle sputtered, smoke rose, and in the curls of it, I saw one last image. Myself, sitting in a room with no windows, a child beside me, drawing, both of us humming a song I'd never learned. And as I watched, the child looked up, not scared, not angry, just tired. He pointed at the drawing. A man, a boy, hands held, no rope, no fire, just the word written below. Enough. I woke up on the floor, drenched in sweat. The candle burned low, a pool of wax nearly swallowing its base. The air reeked of old incense and burnt sugar, and on the table, a bowl of rice, still steaming, and beside it, a pair of wooden sandals, child-sized, worn at the heels. I picked them up. They were warm, like someone had just stepped out of them. I didn't cry, didn't shake, just sat there, holding those sandals like they were all that remained of a life I had almost forgotten was ever mine. I stayed like that until sunrise, not moving, not speaking, just listening. And in the silence, I realized something. He never wanted revenge. He never wanted worship. He just wanted to be remembered. That was the story the fire told, not of curses, but of loneliness, not of monsters, but of memories we buried too deep and called evil when they came back asking to be held. I don't remember deciding to return. There was no moment, no ticket booked, no farewell said. One morning I simply woke up and began walking, as if I had always been meant to. The road to Banafra had changed, or perhaps I had. The jungle was thicker now, the air heavier, the silence around the trees deeper than I remembered. No signs, no people, only the rustle of leaves that moved without wind, and the feeling that every step I took was being watched. By the time I reached the village, it felt less like a place and more like a memory wearing the skin of a location. The houses were still there, but the people weren't. No laughter, no cooking smells, no dogs barking, just doors slightly ajar, curtains barely swaying, like someone had just stepped out of every room a moment before I arrived. The temple was still standing, the old one, half eaten by moss and time, but no longer abandoned. Its red curtain swayed, though there was no breeze, and in the stillness beyond it, I felt him, not watching, waiting. I stepped inside. Each footfall echoed like thunder. Dust danced in the light like spirits finally given shape. And at the center of the room, the altar, bare, except for one thing, the statue, returned, whole, but not empty. His eyes met mine the way an old friend's might, without surprise, without accusation, only the quiet acknowledgement that we had always been heading back to this moment. I approached slowly. The scarf I'd once wrapped him in still rested beneath his feet. The red thread around his torso had unraveled slightly, like something had loosened inside him. I knelt, not in worship, but in understanding. I placed the sandals beside him and whispered, "I remember." The air shifted, not with sound, but with release. A pressure I hadn't known was pressing against me finally let go. My shoulders eased, my breath deepened, and behind me, footsteps, small, careful, barefoot. I turned but saw no one, only petals, white lotus petals falling one by one from the ceiling, without roots, without origin, as if something above us had bloomed just to say goodbye. I lit the last candle. Its flame rose high, then settled. I didn't pray. I didn't ask. I only sat, for a long time, until the light outside faded, until the shadows softened, until the statue's eyes seemed to dim, not from death, but from rest. As I stood to leave, something caught my attention. A new drawing, placed gently beneath the candle. This time, no stick figures. Only one thing, an open door. I stepped outside, and for the first time in weeks, months maybe, the wind felt normal, cool, earthy, alive. As I reached the edge of the temple's courtyard, I turned for one final look. The curtain no longer swayed. The statue no longer gleamed. The temple stood quiet, but not empty. Some part of me would always be there, not trapped, just anchored. I left Ban Phra before dawn. No one stopped me. No one followed, but every so often I would hear a faint echo behind me. Not footsteps, not laughter, just the soft sound of a child's voice, barely carried by the wind. "Thank you, Father." And I never answered aloud, but inside I always whispered back. I never really left. Back home I kept one thing, not the statue, not the drawing, the candle, still unlit, wrapped in red thread, waiting, not for fear, not for summoning, just for memory. For when the world grows too quiet, and the wind feels too familiar, and I need to remind myself that every ghost was once just a child who waited too long to be loved. Thanks for watching the whole video. Please give me a like and subscribe to the channel to watch more interesting stories.